but you are not pulling the trigger because you're a chicken, because you are not making a bloody decision, because you are hiding behind excuses of having a difficult conversation.
And I needed to become ruthless and just canceling out meetings.
Sometimes when I make a decision and it works out, we feel like it was the right decision.
Welcome to Get Your House in Order, where the Medici brothers, investors and entrepreneurs, Cris and Dr. Philip Zimmermann, discuss timeless principles of success, significance and legacy. A podcast for business owners who want to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Sponsored by the one and only exclusive Medici community.
Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, where Cris and we talk about what it means to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Today the subject is actually an interesting one to talk about, also because of the political situation we find ourselves in. The topic is ready to be ruthless, act like a Renaissance ruler. Cris, what comes to mind when you hear that topic?
Well, we started the Medici community, and a lot of people kind of start commenting when they hear that hey, I've heard some negative things about the Medici family, like in world history, weren't there some ruthless guys a part of the clan? And I'm always like, yes, there actually were. I say often that I know the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Medici family, and in no way do we want to glorify some of the stuff that they are responsible for. But when I ruthless ruler, when I immediately have to think of Machiavelli. So for those of us who've had some studies in political science back in school or at university, we probably all studied The Prince, Il Principe, by Machiavelli, who actually wrote a commentary on power, which is world famous. It's one of the groundbreaking works within political science. And he actually dedicates the book to Lorenzo the Magnificent, the Medici. So some say that actually what Machiavelli does, he actually comments on Medici power, the negative side of it that he's seen at display in Florence. I've taken a deep dive on Machiavelli. I've read The Prince as a teenager. I studied it again at university, and then through my Renaissance studies, I studied him. And there are these famous quotes about Machiavelli that even have entered our modern day language. So the sentence, "The end justifies the means." The means can be applied in a ruthless way if the end goal is good, is something that goes back to Machiavelli. Which often, when people talk about war and going to war, they say, well, the means are bad, we need to kill people, but the end goal is peace, so we need to kill people along the way. Well, this is very Machiavellian thinking. Then another sentence by Machiavelli is, it's better to be feared than loved. So he in a sense was saying, as a leader, you're not in a popularity contest where everyone just claps and says, hey, you're a great guy. You should be about the results you create for the society or for your kingdom or for your rule that you are in charge of, no matter whether people like you or not. And so there are a lot of very dramatic, drastic things that he comments. And the reason I like to study it, because sometimes I feel like we now live in a time where everything is a little bit kind of wishy-washy, where it's, we all try to be the nice guys in business and in life and don't actually make use of the instruments that are necessary in order to exercise power. So actually I think it's a great theme for us within the realm of business to discuss how do we use power, how do we exercise influence, and how do we make some ruthless decisions on our journey.
Yeah, well, there's a lot again to unpack because it basically I come from the school of leadership. I got my doctorate in strategic leadership, so I really studied how do you exercise influence among people you're leading, what kind of leader you have. So I have a whole philosophy, so to speak. Behind kind of saying, okay, now let's go deeper and really ask the question. Okay, I mean, do you agree with Machiavelli and his assessment? Where would you say this is good, and where would you say there he goes too far? Where do you draw a balance, and what do you think we can learn as business owners to kind of apply to our business? Where should we be ruthless, and where is actually love actually a higher goal than fear?
So I think we need to talk about the most prominent example that we have at the moment of Machiavellian thought of thinking and exercising of power, which is Donald Trump as the president of the United States in his second term, because it is a double-edged sword that we're observing. Now, let me just kind of back up. Me having a background in real estate investing, I've always enjoyed reading The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump when he was a deal maker, a real estate investor in New York City. I thought there were some great lessons and principles that he actually communicated back in the day as a business guy on in order, how do we cut deals? How do we, get big projects launched? And I've actually, read the book and I've given it away. And I very firmly admit that. And on the positive side, when he decided to enter politics and to kind of be this no-nonsense kind of business guy who kind of comes in and says, I don't care who's been schmoozing with whom here in Washington, D.C., and, who's in bed with whom here. I look at what are the facts, what needs to be changed, where can we, where do we need to make some difficult decisions without me trying to just be a popular guy. I think a lot of us business guys were actually quite hopeful and cheerful because we're like, yeah, this is some good bottom line thinking that is being applied in politics that is oftentimes missing. So instead of freaking long processes that take years through the judicial systems, through the parliaments, he kind of cut short with some executive orders. And so aside of me as a business leader, I'm like, well, that's pretty awesome. I remember here on his second term when he started off his first day signing 100 executive orders, I'm like, shoot, this is a leader who's kicking and screaming, and he's done more in his first few weeks than some presidents did in their full term of 4 years. So a side of me wants to cheer and say that's awesome. On the other side, I'm also greatly disappointed on some of the stuff that he's doing, morally speaking. But also just, I think it's just stupid decisions that he's putting out there. And one of the things, and I'm very happy to go on podcast and talk about that, in the public, is that, one of his principles is to kind of create chaos. And then basically go so absurd in his claims and so out there that basically it causes this great stir, and then a few weeks later he kind of cuts a deal. Now that may look on the outside like a good way on how to do the next deal. But actually, I believe he's caused a lot of devastating damage in the midst of it. Because one of the things, and that's actually, I'll actually get back to Machiavelli that the goal actually of good leadership is stability. It's actually that you have stability, within your kingdom. And this is what I don't like what's happening at the moment, what Trump has started putting out there. Stability. Now, what does that mean? Think of Florence in the 15th century, 16th century. There was a lot of instability. There were foreign rulers, there were armies, they were fighting, there were different families fighting each other. There was a lot of conflict. And so a wise ruler was someone who could stabilize and keep things at peace, and I think that's actually good. And so and things you need to do in order to do that are actually positive. So let me comment through my German perspective. We had 16 years of Angela Merkel as the head of Germany, as the chancellor in Europe. And now, after her term, everyone is kind of furious about, she wasn't strong enough as a leader. She didn't take care of Putin back then. She didn't. But I disagree again, because I actually believe that during her 16 years, there was stability, there was flourishing. Business could be taken. There were open borders in terms of free enterprises. People could move around. Yes, there may have been some mistakes on the immigration laws, but in a sense, she kept Europe in check. They called her, Time magazine called her the most powerful woman in the world, and she was, because she had things kind of under her realm. Afterwards, things kind of broke loose and got unstable, and so I think where we need to be ruthless is ensuring stability, and that is often comes with predictability. Where people know this is what we stand for, this is where we're going, and that's what I criticize with Trump at the moment. That's where no one really knows, and that for me is not a positive attribute.
Yeah, well, there's a lot we could go down and talk about. I don't want to talk too much about current day politics, because we find each other on all kinds of positions, and it's very difficult sometimes to kind of change the policy from the leadership style. But let's talk leadership style. This idea that the means justifies, that the end justifies the means, is a very powerful concept, and taking it too far can lead in history to some very, very difficult things. So we would in our time would most probably said that is not true. That can't be true. That the end always justifies the means, because we have a lot of laws that actually prevent us from doing certain things that actually would get us to a good outcome, because life is made up by the means in so many ways, and you become ruthless and you become evil when that kind of thinking creeps into your organization and into your leadership style. Now, at the same time, on the other flip side of the coin, so to speak, you have to sometimes make very difficult decisions that in the meantime are going to hurt and are going to be painful, because it will work towards the good and the more beautiful outcome. We know that with raising kids, building organizations, sometimes it's going to hurt now, but it's going to lead to something better. But you do it because of the loving kindness that you have towards even your own people. So you're not using your people to get to a place where you want to go. You're actually using sometimes and working with your people to get to a place where you want to together go.
Well, let's talk about getting rid of people that are part of your organization, where you actually need to fire people in order to move on. I've always mentally worked hard on myself of seeing the letting go of people as something positive. Now, everything by nature, we feel like it's negative to let someone go, because someone they get a salary, they contribute, they feed the family with the salary that they have. These emotions, we've hired someone, won them to the team, and now we need to let them go. So there's a lot of ways on how we can think negatively about that. I have kind of really started conditioning myself of thinking of the letting go of people as something positive, and here's why, because the health of an organization, the health of your business plan, actually is more important than the individual that is on your payroll, because it is a lot more people that are affected by the health of the organization, meaning all your employees, not just the one. So that's where I've reconditioned myself. I want to have a healthy organization. I want to have a healthy, growing business. I want to have a healthy business culture. And if there's someone on staff who's not performing, or where he's bringing in a toxic climate, or where the gifts do not match the job description, I actually think it is a positive thing to cut the cord and let that person find another company where their gifts and their talents can be applied better, or where they change their mind and just act differently, and so make that a positive thing. Now I know a lot of business guys, we kind of it can bring some sickness to our stomachs of letting people go. We're involved in some mergers and acquisitions where part of every merger and every acquisition is you have to cut some fat off the calf in order to kind of grow further healthy. I think that is part of doing business. It is to keep the animal healthy. You need to trim it down in order to keep growing and developing.
Well, and that's in the kind of the house rule underneath. You kind of talk about this idea is make bloody decisions. And the bloody decisions is not so make bloody decisions so that I can be the king, but make bloody decisions that are right, that in your gut are the best for your people even. But you are not pulling the trigger because you're a chicken, because you are not making a bloody decision because you are hiding behind excuses of having a difficult conversation. Of you're talking more about this employee when they're not around in a bad way than you're actually talking to them, explaining them you need to rise up or get out. One of the two. And so this idea of making bloody decisions and being kind of a ruthless Renaissance ruler, in my understanding, is to say, with the decisions that I know are needed in order for the health and the vitality of whatever I'm doing, either in the business culture, in the team culture, or even in the market,
or the profits.
I need to make this bloody decision, and I can't hide behind maybe an emotion where I'm like, I let me think more about it. If I hear this, I kind of want to throw up because it's a big excuse. We say we want to be strategic. We need to think more about this. No, you don't have to think more about it. In most cases, you already know what the right thing is doing, what the right thing is, and you're just hiding behind needing to think more about it.
Well, so the school of thought that I would subscribe to is this school of thought that leads towards action. And that actually means implementation of decisions. We've all seen that, not just within politics, but also within companies, where just decisions are being dragged out. There's a process, people need to be involved, this team, that team, the board, and everything just drags out. And there's no leader who just kind of puts his fist on the table and says, forget the bloody process. There's an action that is needed. I've been part of some boards where we've dragged our feet, and that's actually where I want to resign. And where I have resigned, I've left some boards where I just felt like they do not want to move the needle. They are hiding behind procedures, policies, and that kind of stuff. And that's not me. I don't want that. So for me, kind of to be quick, rapidness, fastness is actually for me a value, a virtue, because it kind of helps me to move and to stay in the game.
And if it would be an easy decision, or if it would be just black and white, there would be something between right or wrong. It wouldn't need you or I to make that decision, or have the business owner to make that decision. It's either between good or bad, or between good and better, or between bad and worse. These are the decisions we are making. They are more complex, and I understand all of that. But thinking more about them, or just hiding behind a kind of a time for them to sink in is a problem. One thing that helped me is I have an addictive personality, so I stopped playing poker. But there was a time I played a lot of poker, and I spent some very good nights playing poker. And there's actually a book by a famous ex-professional poker playing a woman called Thinking in Bets, and the idea, the premise behind the book is that you actually judge your decisions based on how you made the decision and not the outcome. So what that means is that sometimes when I make a decision and it works out, we feel like it was the right decision. But her premise in the book is, no, that's not the case. Sometimes with poker, you can have a winning hand that that 80% of the time this hand is going to win. And I'm going to go all in because 80% is going to win. Now, I still can lose 20% of the time. It still was the right decision, because I was thinking in bets rather than thinking in just the outcome. And that helped me a lot in business terms or making difficult decisions, to say, you know what, I can never be 100% here, but I think in 70% of the situations, this is the right move to make, and I will not hold the team accountable if it doesn't turn out to be that way. Rather than trying to really, kind of execute well on that decision where most of the things fall.
Well, I think this is where we trip ourselves up often, and I've done this many, many times, is that, we have this perfectionism within us. We just want things to be right. We just want things to be, perfect. And the world is not perfect. And so, dealing with our employees, dealing with customers, we try to do it right, but there is no perfect way, and sometimes we push away the decision making, the bloody decision, because we want it to be perfect. Where we live in an unperfect world, and so in a sense we need to also make peace with that, and just say it's not going to be nice. Now, but I want to comment on something else. I actually feel like some of our upbringing and perhaps even some of our religious background actually makes it difficult for us to act the way we're talking about here. So we as a family, we have a Christian background, so obviously we try to follow the principles that are laid out in the Bible of being truthful, not stealing, the 10 Commandments, loving your neighbor as yourself. I mean, all these great Christian values that we have. Now, in some of the circles that I've been part of, that have a religious aroma to it, it's kind of boils down to just let us all be nice people. Let us, let's be the nice guy here. Let's not do harm to anyone. And this is kind of what it means to be a religious person. Is kind of be nice to everyone. Now. That is actually very frustrating, because if you're being nice to everyone, there's this famous saying: if you want to make everyone happy, sell ice cream. Don't be a business leader, because as a leader you can't be the nice guy. And so I would say, in my sense, also in order to be a good Christian leader, which I want to be, is I can't always be the nice guy. So I think we trip ourselves up, and that's where we really need to just work on this muscle. What are things that are necessary for us to decide?
Well, and that's where I normally kind of say that leadership is more an art than just a science. So there are some leadership principles to an organization and to the way you lead. But then on the higher level, leadership is really an art where there are certain rules to that art. It's almost like a dance that is happening. Where I kind of compare it also with being a father and being a parent. You have to love, but you also have to give boundaries. And love, these are not two opposite things. And sometimes I think what you mean with just being nice is like, oh, I'm all for love, but no boundaries. Everybody can do whatever they want, and it creates chaos. It creates a problem. It creates that in your family if there are no boundaries. Now, if we have the dark side, the dictatorship, and I mean, we come from a country where this has been lived to the extreme. That's why the word leadership doesn't even exist in German, in the German language, and so finding that dance, that on the one hand you actually really have the best in mind for your kids, but you also know that there are certain responsibilities and rules and regulations that need to be in place for them to really thrive. And the same is true in the business context, that you have to be strong at some things and ruthless, even if you're nice about it, but you have to be ruthless, because otherwise the whole culture of your organization is gonna rotten. But at the same time, employees need to know, your kids need to know that you deeply love them for who they are, and that you want the best for them, and that you actually are somebody they can talk to and talk with.
Well, I want to close with one area where I feel like business leaders need to be ruthless, and that is with your time. This is where I often feel like we need to be nice with our time. For example, with meetings. I remember years ago, every meeting that I put in my calendar was always minimum of an hour, because I felt like if I call the meeting, and we discuss something, it needs to have ample time for everyone to speak up in the meeting, and so every meeting was an hour. And at some point, I read in a book that there are a lot of meetings where we're wasting time. We're wasting our time. We're wasting our employees' time because we just put something in the calendar. And I needed to become ruthless and just canceling out meetings. And so one of the things I even evaluate on my calendar, how often and how many times do I actually cut short? How much time do I actually spend in a meeting? If a decision needs to be made quickly, we don't need to have a meeting to discuss it for an hour just to make sure that everyone's being heard. We can also do that within 5 minutes. So also ending a meeting quickly, you can be ruthless with that. Not having listened to everyone and just executing can be ruthless. Another example is on phone calls. I've a few years ago decided I don't take unscheduled phone calls. Well, I'm busy doing something. All of a sudden, my phone rings and someone wants to talk with me. Well, I need to be ruthless with my time. Just because someone feels they need to call me, I can't respond to that. Now I can work through my calendar and schedule and put it somewhere. But perhaps that person just wanted to chat and blah blah blah. But we need to be ruthless with that. With our inbox. Some business leaders feel like an endless need to reply to every email that gets into their inbox. I years ago decided I don't need to reply to every email. I can just just because someone feels the need to email me, I don't need to email them back. So I can just leave it there. So for me, also on a very practical level, we need to be ruthless with our time, with our money. We need to be quick in our execution and decisions, and that means we can't always just be the nice guy. And let me just say, I like to be a nice guy as well. So but we can't.
So get your house in order, and sometimes it starts with making some bloody decisions on where to be ruthless. So a lot to think about. But think of maybe one question or one thing where you feel like, okay, I need to make a decision. I need to be ruthless, and thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast. We're happy if you subscribe on YouTube, where there's a video and there's audio wherever that's available, and we'll see or hear you on the next episode.